Now on BBC One, as New Age travellers converge on Stonehenge for their annual celebration of the midsummer solstice, tonight's Heart of the Matter looks at proposed changes in the law which could have a profound impact on their way of life.
Events this summer show the police evicting New Age travellers from sites, moving them on, blocking roads to control where they go. Is this appropriate legal action, or an attempt to eliminate an alternative culture?
You cannot have a situation where a section of the community is able to simply flout the obligations and rules that appertain to that community. Unless, you're in a desert where it doesn't matter.
One can gauge the strength of a democracy by the way it treats its minorities. And I would say in this instance we're not giving a very good impression.
Every year they become more visible. Every summer, more and more young people opt for what they see as the freedom of life on the open road. But what they encounter is the hostility of local residents and the attention of the police, who regularly move them on from sites that they're occupying illegally. And now government proposals will make their way of life even harder. So, do people have a right to an alternative lifestyle? And must everyone else simply learn to tolerate those who want to live in a different way from the majority? This is the story of a typical clash between police and travellers. It happened at Coombe Farm near Stratford-upon-Avon, Warwickshire. A cluster of young people had settled in quite peaceably throughout March. Then, in mid-April, local police received a tip-off that there was going to be a party at Coombe Farm on the approaching bank holiday weekend. So the police alerted the absentee owner, who went to court to gain a possession order to have the young people evicted from the site. The name New Age Travellers is a largely meaningless media invention. Others call them hippies. Around 30,000 in the summer move between the many free festivals.
I've been at a few festivals where they've come along and sort of said, right, you're packing down now and you're going now. And other times where they sort of said, well, you've got a couple of days to leave. And other festivals where they've come and have been really heavy and smashed windscreens and things like that. So I'm hoping that the last doesn't happen.
Claudia is one of some 10,000 travellers for whom travelling is a year-round way of life, a deliberate and continuing choice rather than a summer outing. She has thought through the reasons for that choice.
I was sick of living on the 27th floor in a squat, basically, with a kid. I grew up in London and I didn't see much of a future for myself there. I left, I sort of escaped my destiny, if you like, and I didn't want my two children to, have the same future. It's not a unnatural instinct to be nomadic. A lot of people have got a nomadic instinct in them that they don't want to see the same thing outside their window every day, and I'm one of those people. It's a community where you're not isolated. If I was living in a city on my own, I'd be isolated with two children. I would never have the degree of freedom that I've got. I know that here I'm safe to leave my children. They're not going to get snatched. Everyone's going to be keeping an eye out for each other. I look after other people's kids.
These communities, peaceful and caring among themselves, think the outside world is unjustified in its hostility towards them.
The authorities at the moment are extremely scared that people want to go out and have fun, and they feel that because it's not under their control, it's out of control, which is just not true. I mean, Any sensible officer will tell you that there is a hell of a lot less violence on any party site than in the average pub on a Saturday night. Because if your hair's let down the whole time, you have to know how to coexist peacefully. And that's why sites are very peaceful places.
While life on the farm seems idyllic to the travellers, not so for their neighbours. New Age travellers have large numbers of dogs roaming freely. Tom Dancer farms 530 acres not far from Coombe Farm. Another group of travellers had settled on the fields next to his. He keeps some 700 ewes, many at this time of year with small lambs. On March the 19th, 2 dogs attacked his sheep and did substantial damage.
And there were 2 dogs there, and they had all the sheep in a heap in the corner of the field. And there's a big ditch there, and these poor old sheep were down in the ditch. We went across the fields, because obviously we know our own farm fairly well. We knew the direction they'd gone in, and we managed to cut the one dog off and got within a very near distance, near enough that we thought we would shoot and kill him. We didn't. And we followed that dog back to the camp, which is why we know where he came from. There's no ifs and buts or doubts or anything. That's where he came from. When we came back, because we didn't stop to look what had happened, I mean, there was a ditch full of dead and dying sheep.
6 sheep were killed outright, 5 more had to be shot, 29 lambs were left motherless and are being reared by hand. Incidents such as this incense local people who feel they work long and hard to sustain their way of life, only to see it threatened by strangers who have no right to be there.
They've got the right to opt out if they wish, but not to opt out and then cause trouble to other people, whatever form that trouble takes, whether it happens to be dog problems, pilfering or whatever.
At Coombe Farm, the travellers obtained a 14-day postponement of the possession order, but the police were increasingly worried. Police forces round the country reported that other travellers were beginning to move and were heading towards Coombe Farm.
Coombe Farm in itself was not a problem. What was a problem was that for 14 days the owner had been trying to regain his property, that the process of law was continuing and that eventually they would go. But in the meantime, there were arrangements being made for a massive party to be held that weekend. We've got to look after the people who live there and the people who lived around there. And they were getting pretty worried. They'd already had 2,000 people descend upon them the week before, and they were not happy to think there were more coming.
Police have powers under the Public Order Act 1986 to block roads to certain people, denying them the freedom to move around the country that we usually take for granted. Warwickshire Police closed many roads into the county to New Age travellers. Their aim was clearly to stop those arriving for the party before it even got going.
Well, basically, we got here last night. I'm not sure what time. It must have been just after 12 because we were told point blank that an injunction had come into force like half an hour before, and there was no way we were going to get anywhere near the site.
Finally, the police moved in. Warwickshire Police had summoned help from 5 other counties, and over 5 days, 700 police officers and staff were to be deployed at a cost of some £250,000. But at Coombe Farm on the 30th of April, police advanced with the county court bailiff at their head to read the possession order, the due process of law, to the travellers before they were evicted.
I'm a county court bailiff. I'm here from Stratford County Court, and I have a warrant for repossession of this land. Would you please vacate it at once?
What, we have some time to move? Bronze 2 to Bronze 1. What, we've got some time to move?
Yes, this is
Today is the day that you have to move.
We're arranging times.
You want a confrontation?
We're arranging times for 2 weeks.
Are you trying to do something? None of these chaps want to fight, do you? Beat up little children! He's doing what you want!
Systematically and in formation, the police have progressed all the way down the line. There have been encounters, there have been 2 arrests, but at last the travellers are beginning to move their vehicles off the site. Then began a typical cat-and-mouse game. The travellers, now forced onto the public roads, constituted a major traffic problem. They had nowhere to go, no destination, and even after hasty consultation, they were to find many routes closed to them.
I'd rather go to Bidford now, I reckon, and then see
Well,
what
it's just
happens.
as far, though, isn't it? That's the thing.
The police were insisting that no more than 6 vehicles moved off in any convoy. So off they shambled, a motley collection of caravans, lorries and buses. The police helicopter monitoring their movements, the lanes getting narrower, the route more purposeless. This is where this particular group of travellers is fetched up for the night. It's a lay-by on the A46, just 6 miles from where we all set out this morning. It's taken us all day to get here, and a circuit of some 30 miles. Here they are then, probably for the night, with a discreet police presence still keeping an eye on the travellers.
Yeah.
What, where we come from?
Yeah.
Today?
Yeah.
Stratford. Oh, we've all come from Stratford today.
Prior to that, where have you been?
Oh.
Yeah.
Where are you going to end tonight?
Well, we don't know. We're staying here until we find somewhere to go to.
Well, it's 7 o'clock already.
Yeah, I know.
By what time do you expect to find a place for the night?
10, 11ish, I suppose.
Does it often go on that late?
Yeah.
This whole situation is about to intensify. The government's latest proposals will introduce such heavy restrictions that even camping in lay-bys, as the Coombe Farm travellers did, will be made illegal. The Public Order Act will be strengthened. Police powers to evict and arrest will be increased, and powers of control on the roads will be extended to minor highways. Only 6 vehicles will be allowed to park together. The severity of the proposals aims to avoid such events as last year's gathering at Castle Morton, when some 20,000 came together on one site.
I think if you looked last year at what happened at Castle Morton and at Lexlade, there were major gatherings. Control was lost. And it was lost because large numbers of people arrived from different directions. We are determined that won't happen this year, and working with the surrounding forces, we are trying to prevent large gatherings.
What right do you have to ban the highway to one set of people and not another?
Well, we can actually stop anybody from going somewhere if there's a liability to cause a breach of the peace.
It looks pretty bad, doesn't it, if it's reported that a county, say like Wiltshire, has just been closed to New Age travellers?
That's right. And I've got to tell you, that's what we tried to do around Coombe Farm. When we found the scale of event that was planned, and when we had hard information to say that scale of event was likely, we tried to do that. It does look repressive, but we're not talking about individuals, we're talking about lots of people who want to come together for a joint activity, and that activity will have a major impact on the people who live around that activity.
Many individuals, including the Reverend David Penny, who works with travellers, feel the proposals will unjustly criminalise large numbers.
You're accused before you do something wrong of a common purpose and intent that you're going to break the law. And so the excuse is we must stop this in order to preserve the peace. Sounds very logical. But I know of people who as individuals have walked as a pilgrimage, for instance, to Stonehenge, with no intention of trying to start a festival, but to try and carry out their religious observance around the solstice or equinoxes, and being turned back, even on their own. So I think the application of the law is questionable.
Others feel that those whose very lifestyle involves trespass on others' property need to be controlled.
England particularly is one of the most densely populated countries per acre in the world. And unfortunately, the laws have to reflect that. We are no longer in a society where people can do their own thing without encroaching on other people.
Do New Age travellers have a right to their lifestyle at all?
People have a right to pursue an alternative lifestyle, and they have a right to travel, but they have to use those rights or have those rights subject to the responsibilities and duties that go with them. A lot of them don't show any efforts to contribute towards the system whatsoever. Some of them have got road tax, the majority haven't. Some of them do seasonal work, but most of them don't. And they want the benefits of the system, they want the schooling, which is fair enough, which they're entitled to, but without having the inconvenience of having to pay for it.
How can we get an address if we're travellers, and how can we get a job if, you know, the ecological niche for travelling people to get farm work is closing because increasing mechanisation in agriculture. It's much harder to make a living on the road, and so a lot of people do have to claim the dole. And a lot of people think it's crazy that hippies should be allowed to roam the countryside and claim the dole. But we're even saving the government housing benefit.
There are hundreds of other dole scroungers. We're just the ones that everyone really hates, you know. It's sort of, I don't understand. If we were in cities, in houses, we'd probably still be on the dole. You know. Doesn't mean to say our job prospects would go up any better if we were living in houses.
I know that rights have to be matched by responsibilities and respect for other people and their property. But it's very difficult in the present climate to exercise rights if you haven't got freedom of choice and to act in a responsible way in relationship with others. So such things as the right of freedom of movement, the right to freedom of peaceful assembly, the right to social security, all things perhaps which we take for granted in our settled community, does appear to be becoming less and less available to this minority group.
Some people even believe there is a hidden agenda simply to make all travelling impossible, which would amount to driving a different way of life out of existence. Their evidence, the not-so-hidden statements of politicians, past and present.
I'm only too delighted to do anything we can to make life difficult for such things as hippie convoys.
This summer I announced tougher rules affecting so-called New Age travellers. Most people were as sickened as I was by the sight of these spongers descending like locusts, demanding benefits with menaces. We are not in the business of subsidising scroungers.
This government is obsessed with controlling the population. But why can't the government just let people have places to gather, as in the horse fairs or whatever, buy and sell vehicles to meet people? We have no other means of communication. Society as a whole was greedy enough to take all the common land away from the use of travelling people. They were greedy enough to swallow all the wasteland that we could have parked on. And then they feel that we shouldn't ask for something back for nothing. But if we had the freedom to park up on areas which were traditionally not used by people, we would do so. The only reason we start stepping on people's feet is because there's no land left.
Land ownership in Britain is very exact and rigorously honoured. Even so-called common land isn't everybody's. Much of it is in private ownership or subject to the rights of graziers or tenant farmers. And Britain's laws of trespass make little allowance for shared use. In effect, virtually every piece of land is somebody's absolute property.
A town dweller who sees lots of fields, he thinks, oh, well, there's lots of open space, but most of the time it's somebody's factory floor. That land has to be used to produce food. And I think there is in some ways, it is perhaps a reflection of a lack of understanding between the town and the countryside. They don't understand that most of the land is used, and they feel perhaps it's sort of the classic thing of why can't I have a bit of what you've got? The answer is that if you allow that sort of precedent to operate, then it's a very dangerous precedent indeed. There are lots of small farmers who are eking out a subsistence existence, who earn barely £6,000 clear profit, which they have to feed their families on, working hard, working with the soil, and really one cannot justify a position where somebody can just take what belongs to somebody else.
If we own a piece of land, we have absolute control over that land. You know, if I put my foot on that piece of land, it's trespass, and I can be taken to court. In many areas of Europe, you can't do that. People say ownership of some assets have got to be shared. You know, if I own all of the Yorkshire moors, I might have to share it with a few walkers, or if I have a very large estate, if somebody camps on it, it's less heinous than if I only have a small front garden. It's relative. We have absolute land law in this country, which does cause difficulties.
There is a very clear distinction to be made between access, lawful access, access which means adhering to the bylaws, adhering to the rights of other countryside dwellers, of other access users, to the one of occupying land. And New Age travelling requires the occupation of land.
If the problems created by travellers arise from their congregating in large numbers, what about those who lead more individual lives? Chris and Tash come from Yorkshire and have been travelling for 6 years. She has a degree in sculpture, he is self-taught. They sell their carvings at festivals and earn a bit more from casual work. They've been on this site in Gloucestershire since Christmas. The local council has piled gravel at the road to stop others joining them. Now, the landlord has a possession order forcing them to move on, yet this remains a way of life they value.
I've got freedom to sit and look out the window and sort of, you know, it's difficult to put freedom of thought. I can get up and I can go for a nice walk into the woods or whatever, and you know, I mean, it's only so, like, I can sort of pretend that it's my little bit of land here for a while until the landowner comes and kicks us off.
I much prefer being out in the countryside. I used to get very anxious living in rooms, and you never felt it was your own again. Mm-hmm. And then squatting, you know, you've always up and go, and you've got to take all your stuff with you, and you end up leaving things behind. I used to have all sorts of anxious sort of anxiety attacks and things when I went into supermarkets and all sorts. That's a bit of a mess, really. I do feel a lot more relaxed. It must be to do with the open air, I think. You know, if I felt tense, I can just go outside. I do miss baths, but we've got a good connection of friends. We can have a bath at least once a week. We've got, you know, just a mile away. You know, we've got various places we can go. We can also go to this sports centre and use the showers there and things.
Now tell me about this hair that you've grown this way.
What a lot of people do is put oil. You can put oil in it, like some people use jasmine oil and things like that, and that helps your hair mat up. But it just happens naturally anyway, you know. And then sort of, and as the bits start matting together, you know, you just sort of maybe you rub them a bit together, things like that. I don't know.
Is it how travelling people recognise each other?
Anywhere we go, if we're sort of walking through a town centre somewhere, we see someone with this sort of hairstyle and sort of other traveller things, like maybe they have a dog with them, or maybe they have combat boots on, or whatever, yeah. We know we can go up and walk up and talk to that person and immediately be engaged in conversation. There's no, you know, there's no ice to break. That's one of the brilliant things between travellers. And I think, you know, a lot of people are isolated in society in general, and they've got nothing to, you know, to identify with.
A common value running through the New Ages is that it's almost anarchistic, like the levellers and of old. They don't claim that the land belongs to them, but they belong to the land. It's actually almost a theological, scriptural connotation of the Psalms. You know, the earth belongs to the Lord and all that therein is. So they resist this idea that somehow an individual has rights to possess all these things over against other people. So it's almost a reaction to the materialistic society in which we live. Now, we may see it as a threat, some people, but I think it's a necessary message, almost a prophetic message, that we need to get back to base. Well, what are the true values which hold society together?
If someone were to offer you a nice little job and a nice little home, would you both opt for that?
I wouldn't. I don't think you would, you?
No.
So because you see, I've already got it. Yeah. I've got a nice little job, and that's the job of being a sculptor. I'm a sculptor, I'm an artist. I'm providing this country with culture that's badly needed, I might add, in the 1990s. As for a nice home, I think this is a nice enough home for us at present. If you mean, would I give this caravan away for a chance to live in, say, you know, a two-bedroom house somewhere in town? No, absolutely no way, no matter how nice the house was.
The legislation that threatens New Age travellers also threatens gypsies. Stowe Fair in the Cotswolds has been held under Royal Charter since 1476.
If you're going to go on, I'm going to sell it to you.
Tell her
If you're going to go on, I'm going to sell it to you.
Tell her that.
Go on, if you're going on, I'm going to sell it to you.
Tell her that.
Well, listen.
It happens twice a year, but local residents complain that numbers are increasing and the event spills over, with some caravans now here for several weeks. But it remains a gypsy event, drawing gypsies to it from across the whole country to trade horses and meet with different families. Now, the gypsy people are different kinds of travellers altogether. Gypsies have been around for centuries. They have their own language, they have their own culture. But they feel they're being lumped together with the New Age travellers. And the more hostility to New Age travellers increases, so too do the gypsies suffer. Indeed, they feel they're being twinned with the New Age travellers in government attempts to control them all.
So strange in England.
David Jones is a Welsh gypsy, born and bred, steeped in the history and customs of his people.
They're going to change the law, or they intend to debate to change the law because of the problems with the New Age travellers, you know. Not that we've got anything against New Age travellers at all, but it's difficult to change the law for the gypsies who have been allowed to travel for hundreds of years and keep their culture as travelling because of what somebody else is doing. You know, we don't do away with a football match because you get a few hooligans.
The tradespeople of Stowe are up in arms. They dread the gypsies' arrival. Many of the pubs close altogether. Others are selective in whom they serve. Some shops in Stowe, many of them dealing in antiques and tourist trinkets, are closed for the duration.
Everybody has rights, but with rights goes responsibilities, right? And if we could get somebody to agree that their right to come to the town also comes with the responsibility that they behave and they treat us with some respect and acknowledge our rights, that they make a contribution towards cleaning up afterwards, that they control their children effectively so that the traders don't have to close, fine.
Gypsies have been hounded for centuries, so that's not new. What is new is that government proposals now threaten their very survival. Gypsies as a group are recognised in European and British law as an ethnic minority. They feel they have different rights to New Age travellers, but they share with them the prospect of being criminalised if government plans become law.
The intention is clearly to stop travelling. It causes tremendous problems to Shire County Tories. And yes, the intention is to put one more nail in and hope that that will stop travelling, force people onto settled sites or into houses, and that's what the legislation said.
Is there any place for a nomadic way of life anymore?
Legally, no. Nomadism is illegal in this country, and there's probably 20 or 30 laws, from the highways laws to the public health laws to the planning laws to the site licence laws, that makes it illegal. There was a death penalty against travellers in Queen Elizabeth's time, and they still survived. So they will survive, yes.
They can change the law for ethnic groups, can't they? For Indians, they changed the law that if they wore a turban, they didn't need to wear a crash helmet. The gypsies are a race, exactly like the Indians or the Pakistans or any race, any ethnic people. They want their own community among their own people. And by passing a law that says you're not a race, that won't change their heart. It won't change their thoughts. It won't change their culture. They have their own marriage ceremony, their own ceremony for death. They have their own way. They have a certain way of eating the food, a certain way of preparing the food. Their culture is different. And you can't change a culture by changing the law. But what you can allow is an ethnic group to be together. Allow them to buy their own land.
2 eggs, baby.
Why cost the taxpayer millions of pounds in paying for land that the gypsies can pay for themselves? They have finance, the gypsies. Our people are not paupers. You can see that by looking around this fair.
Oh, you're a bit strong, talking big bucks.
Do you think it affects our society if these people vanish? Does it matter to us?
Yes, and it matters to us more and more with time. I mean, it matters to the North Americans now, the way they treated the the travelling people there, the Indians. It matters terribly to the Australians. It matters to us because we behave badly. And historically we look back and think that was a terrible chapter. Why did we have to do that? What was the threat? What was the problem about people camping on the side of a road, 2 miles from anywhere? What was the problem? And then it tells us something about us as people, that we have a fear of outsiders, that we're primitive, really.
Stowe Fair is just one of around 25 fairs that happen in England every summer and provide a focal point for travellers' lives. In April they staged the Forest Fair in the Forest of Dean, an example of a situation working to everyone's satisfaction. This is a 3-day event with car parks and toilets as well as stores and entertainments. The travellers' stay here is legal and licensed. The farmer who owns the land agrees to the fair. Here at least travellers can relax and keep the law among their own kind.
I remember once doing a sort of an off-the-cuff survey of parents. Asked them why were they wanting to criminalise travellers so much, and talked about the damage to property. And there was sort of terrible myths being played about by people in authority, MPs and others, saying, oh, they were carriers of HIV and AIDS, they were molesters of children, they were drug barons. Now, and also that people felt their property was threatened. But behind all this hype, there was this feeling that somehow they had to protect their children from the temptation of joining the travellers, because they felt it difficult at times to defend their own culture. The fact that they were dependent with a heavy mortgage and a job, things that were accepted were breaking down, like marriages.
I think it's one reason they don't allow the festivals. It's not for all the other reasons that they give, for making a place look untidy, or leaving a mess, or making all the noise. It's not that. It's that young people will come out of the town, or even older people will come out of the towns, people who are living pretty bad existences, and they'll see, God, these people have got it sussed the way they're living, and I think that's what they're afraid of.
That there is a true dilemma, no one doubts. Crudely, it's the rights of travellers versus the rights of owners. But many of those involved, the police as much as the travellers, feel that the proposals to make parking, camping and travelling in large convoys illegal may solve some problems only to create others.
New Age travellers is a classic problem. It's a problem without a solution. And my worry is that if you have very strict legislation, we're going to have lots of people, those people who might have an overgrown sense of fear, saying, look, you've got the powers, get rid of them. The police aren't doing anything. We may be pushed into actually moving people when there is no reason.
There are two levels of law and order. One which applies to you and I, and one which applies to them. And the ordinary person can't see why it appears that they are treated differently and better.
Police are more lenient?
Yes, I mean, in other words, you pay your taxes, you live by the law, and they don't. Why should they be different?
The conformist society cannot and should not seek to eliminate an alternative lifestyle. That, at the extreme, would be tyranny. On the other hand, law-breaking is a different matter, and no one has the right to ride roughshod over laws that guarantee people security and property. What remains to be seen is whether, in the light of the government proposals, that fine balance can be maintained. An edited transcript of tonight's programme is available. For your copy, please send a cheque payable to BSS for £2 to Heart of the Matter 4, P.O. Box 7, London W3 6XJ.